Job is a part of the Bible's. What's the matter? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. The book of Job is a part of the Bible's wisdom literature, along with Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. These books ask the question, how do we live life well? The book of Job answers that question through the lens of God's justice and suffering. If you're interested in this topic, then please stay tuned. You'll be surprised at what the Bible teaches us through Job's suffering. Hi, I'm Angela with Entrusted with the Journey. So let's look at the book of Job together. In the beginning of the book of Job, God and Satan are having a conversation. God says, have you tried my servant Job? He's blameless, he's upright, he fears me. And Satan's reply to God hyping Job up was, well, he's only that way because you keep rewarding him. So then Satan said, you keep blessing this man, so of course he's going to love you. Who doesn't like to be blessed? Satan says, take away all that he has, and I'm sure that he will respond to you very differently. So God agrees to Satan's proposal, and literally everything that Job has is now gone. All of his possessions, everything he loves, and everything he cares about is now gone. Okay, so now this is on another day. God and Satan are having another conversation, and again, God says, have you considered my servant Job? Okay, this man is upright. He's doing the right thing. He fears me. He shuns evil. And after you did all that I allowed you to do, he still has maintained his integrity. And y'all, here goes Satan talking about some skin for skin. Okay. He says, but now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. So God says, cool, but you just can't take his life. So Satan then goes out and he inflicts. Is it again? Okay. Shut the door. Love you. Shut the door. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hello. Bye-bye. So then Satan leaves the presence of God and goes and inflicts all of these painful sores on Job. Job's wife, I'm sure, is also feeling some things, but she didn't respond in the best way after seeing what just happened to her husband. She goes and she says, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. Job responds to her, you are like a foolish woman. Shall I accept good from God and not trouble? Whew. Okay, so that phrase right there, will you accept the good and not the hard things? That would have just made me just go like, okay, you're right. You win this time. So next we're introduced to Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. So I think initially they just wanted to be sympathetic, just make sure they were there to show some sort of support because they knew their friend was suffering. But then I guess after a while they had some thoughts to share with Job. So as time goes on, Job's friends then begin to share their thoughts and try to give him advice on his current situation. They go back and forth. The conversations go a little something like this. We know Job's friends, this is Job's friend speaking.
We know that God is just. We know that God is fair. We know that this is how God rules the world. We are looking at your current situation. You have lost everything. You got all these sores all over you. Your life looks like a mess. So you're getting what you deserve because that is how God rules the world.
Job continues to plead his innocence with his friends, and he's starting to get a little bit frustrated. Like, okay, I'm trying to tell y'all that I have done nothing. I'm trying to do the right thing, but this is what God has done to me. He's trying to explain this point to his friends, and his friends are really just not hearing his words. And so Job is starting to get frustrated. There's one point where Job is basically like, y'all are not helpful. So his friends are doing what most people would have done. You're sharing input, trying to help a friend based on what you understand about the world and what you think might be helpful. So Elihu is another friend who then comes on the scene. Elihu, when he's introduced in the book of Job, he's upset because Job is too busy trying to justify himself and not God. He's upset with the other three friends because they weren't able to condemn Job as far as how he was speaking of God. The thing that I want to take note of about Elihu is that he's actually younger than all the men who are having these conversations with Job, right? Job's friends. He's younger than them, but yet his response to Job's situation is more accurate. Elihu basically says, you don't actually know the reason for your suffering. You have all of these things going on, but your suffering could actually be because it's a warning. It could be because God is trying to protect you from a future danger. It could be something to help you grow in your character. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are having to deal with all of this suffering because you did something wrong. So now that everyone is done talking to Job and giving their opinions and input, God has chimed in and he said to Job, "Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man, I will question you, and you shall answer me." He then asked Job all of these questions that literally, who knows the answer to these questions outside of God himself and in his wisdom? The book keeps going and God says again, "Brace yourself like a man. I will question you and you shall answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself?" So Job is left there kind of just like,
oh man, like I probably should have just not even said anything. But yeah, let me just be humble because I have no way to have any of this knowledge. This knowledge is too wonderful for me. Why did I even step into this space?
As I was reading through the book of Job, a few things caught my attention. I learned a few lessons from Job and his suffering. So the first lesson I learned is that we have no idea really what's going on in the spiritual realm. God is having conversations with Satan. Satan is doing what God is allowing him to do. We're experiencing what God has allowed Satan to do. We have no idea what's really going on in the spiritual realm. We don't know why suffering happens. I do know that spiritual warfare is real. There are real forces around us all the time that we can't see that have an impact on our lives. There are a couple of books that I really love. C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, and then Priscilla Shire's Fervent. My favorite books on spiritual battle. I'll link them in the description. The second lesson that I picked up on is that you've got to be really careful with who you are choosing to listen to and allow to be in your space as you're having a hard time and going through some major suffering. I mean, our relationships with people, those who are closest to us, they actually matter, and they especially matter during these times, right? Like, you're able to see who your real friends are. Like, I'm not saying that those three men weren't Job's real friends, but what I am saying is that they gave him terrible advice, right? They gave him advice that was just not accurate. Like Job even said himself, he was like, okay, you guys are actually not even helpful in this moment. So I think it's so important for us to really, when we're in such a vulnerable state, to be wise about who we allow into our space, into our situation, and who we allow to fill us with words and thoughts, right? Like, these can be people who could lead us to be either more or less faithful, trusting God more or trusting God less, as we are actually living it, right? Like, people can share what they think. They're not living it. You know what I mean? You are. And so we've got to be very mindful, like, okay, Is this a person who is going to lead me to trust God more? Is this a person who will have me be more dependent on God, to be more prayerful, more faithful? Or am I just going to leave here more frustrated than when I began? It's the next lesson that I was thinking about, and it's still kind of related to the friends. Age doesn't mean that you're wise. The older you are, it doesn't mean the more wisdom you have. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar were older than Elihu. And they all gave, those three men that I listed first, they all gave Job terrible advice, right? It wasn't advice that was full of wisdom. Elihu, even though he was younger, he came to Job and gave Job some pretty good advice as far as how to view his suffering, even in light of who Job knows who God is, right? So not to get all crazy, but jot down in the comments some crazy advice that a friend, a good friend, has given you and that you look back on and now you're just like, ooh, that was not the best advice. Drop that down in the comments. So in the end of Job's story, God blessed him with twice what he had before he had gone through all of the suffering. So the next lesson that I caught on to was suffering is not a punishment. Blessings are not necessarily a reward. So losing everything for Job wasn't a punishment. The reason that we know that is because we were able to read it in Job's 1 and 2. Job gaining everything at the end of the book, it's not a reward either. So in God's wisdom, he decided to allow Satan to take those things away from Job. And in his wisdom, he gave those things back. So from Job's story, my overall takeaway is that I can trust God's wisdom. No matter what comes, good or bad, I can trust that God knows what he's doing and he'll take care of me. I hope this was helpful for you, and until next time, thank you for watching.